chapter 1. Everyone found it in your Bibles?
Yeah.
Awesome. There are 22 verses in the first chapter of Esther. So I'm super excited to go through this. It's kind of funny because there's a lot of stuff already in the first chapter that you're kind of like, this is really awkward. But we're going to study through the whole book together. We're going to cross it off our book list and move on to the next one after this. But there are some things I want you to think about before we go into the actual first chapter. Throughout the book of Esther, God isn't mentioned. Kind of awkward, right? Considering it's in the Bible. Why would the book of Esther not have mentioned God really? Anyone got any ideas? What do you think?
I think they were focusing on us.
Focusing on Esther more than God? Maybe? Okay.
Or whatever.
Okay. Well, I think there's something to be said about why something happens, why a person believes something without even having to say it. There's a saying that it's actually biblical as well. You know, faith is faith that you can't see, faith in the thing that you can't see, rather than the thing you can see. The idea of like, you can't see the Holy Spirit, but I know I've got it inside me because I'm guided, I'm taught to by God, I can understand His words, I can understand the Bible, and I can apply it to my life. Whereas it's really easy to see a fridge and believe in a fridge because I know that fridge is there, and I felt that fridge, I installed that fridge, I filled it with stuff, and it's really easy to believe that that thing's a real thing. So there's something different there to be said. So I just wanted to kind of challenge you on that with Esther. Why do you think God's not mentioned? But actually, where is God in the book of Esther? Because there's a lot of situations in this book where God's grace is abundant. It's all the way through, but we've got to kind of be able to see it, okay? So even though God was not mentioned in this book, there is an emphasis that Esther knew, or understood at least, who God is and what He can do. So the events in the book of Esther take place about 55 to 65 years after the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. The book is set in Susa, the primary capital of the Persian Empire, during the rule of King Xerxes, which is a pretty epic name, Xerxes. So chronologically, we can put this book right in the middle of the book of Ezra. Basically, it's happening at the same time. So after the second temple in Jerusalem was dedicated, but prior to Ezra leading the group of exiles out to Jerusalem, so basically in 458, 460 BC, around that timeline, you can kind of see where this book is in play. Okay, so we're going to jump into the first book of Esther. And we're going to look at, this is our new little layout, which is awesome. Verses 1 to 9. Aiden, can you read those for us? Verses 1 to 9, please.
I'm just going to mess up a lot of words in there.
You go for it, man.
These events happened in the day of King Xerxes.
So have you got Ahasuerus? Or have you got Xerxes in yours?
I got
Ahasuerus? Okay.
I got that.
Okay, nice.
Who reigned over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia.
Yeah, perfect.
At the time of, I'm just going to keep reading his name.
Ahasuerus? Yeah, we need to work on that.
Ruled the empire from his royal throne at the fortress of Susa.
Yeah.
In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all of his nobles and officials. He invited all of the military officers of Persia and I'm just going to mess it up. Media. Okay, sorry, just diversion. Well as the princesses and nobles of the provinces. The celebration lasted 180 days. A tremendous display of the opulent. Well, how do you pronounce that?
I think you've got a different word.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I forgot.
What we got here? The opulent?
Opulent wealth
Yeah.
of the empire and the pomp of the splendor of his majesty.
Okay, which verse are you in there?
I'm in 4. Just finished 4.
You just finished 4. Adam, can you read 5 to 9?
And when these days were acquired, The king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan. Is that right?
Yep. You got really nice.
The place both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hanging fastened with cords of fine line and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver, upon pavement a red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another. The royal wine is abundance according to the state of the king, and the drink was according to the law. None did accomplish, for so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also, Vashti,
whatever you want to say.
Vashti,
Yeah.
the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
I'm going with that.
There you go. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so thank you, Adam. Thank you, Aidan, for that. So these are verses 1 to 9. We basically have the king holding a grand old feast. Okay, so the weird name Ahasuerus. Now we know some things about this guy, and Xerxes was another name for him. Okay, he inherited the vast Persian Empire from his father Darius I. This is the same Darius mentioned in Daniel 6 and Daniel 6:25. So Daniel 6:1 and Daniel 6:25. Same guy. Pretty awesome. That kind of links over, kind of gives you a little bit more history about it all. So we have a king who inherited the throne, basically. He's there because he inherited it. Usually kings were made by taking over another country and taking over that way. But we've already read that he holds over 127 provinces. That is a big kingdom. Big kingdom. So, we have a picture here. Boom. Kind of crazy, but this is what the feast is kind of pictures as. What it might have looked at. You can see a lot of people there, a lot of food, a lot of wine, a lot of crazy going on. But we can see, basically, it's meant to be a party for the rich, for the princes, for the people closest to him. The king's called in all his best, really. We can read in the verses that he ruled from India all the way over to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. Each province had its own governor. So you've got this idea that it's not just like little towns. There are places that need to be governed, and he is the head honcho. He's the guy looking over all of these things. So the governor was responsible for collecting the tribute owed to the king and raising the armies needed to defend and expand this empire. Okay, so he had a great rule. He had this control over a lot of places. But here he is, Xerxes sitting on his throne in this picture. He's got a great black beard. I'm not sure if he had that or not. But in Shushan, the citadel, we can read about the specific citadel in Daniel 8:2. Nehemiah 1:1, and of course here in the book of Esther. So there's a lot of crossover. This is the best part about the Bible. I love it when this happens, that it mentions it in different books, at different times, at different places, that you can turn around and say, wow, you're talking about that same place. The Hebrew word for citadel refers to a fortified area about the rest of the city, okay? So it's around the city, and it's fortified, it's a big place. That's where the king would sit in, be protected, be looked after, okay? So in the 3rd year of his reign, there is a banquet thrown. The amazing thing about banquets in the book of Esther is that this word banquet is used to describe these elaborate parties. It's mentioned 20 times in the book of Esther. God is not mentioned once, but banquets is mentioned 20 times. That's pretty crazy. This king liked to party, basically. He liked to show everyone how rich he was, how powerful he was, how well off his armies were. Look at this food, look at this wine, look at my riches, look at the wine vessels, look at all these different things I have and you don't. Look how good I am. So he threw these parties for all under his control, and he invited the rich and the famous. And specifically Persian and Media were these two nations who were originally allied in efforts to overthrow the Babylonians. So they brought them all together to overthrow. Like, they were originally allied because of this, and it was a party, and Aidan read that it lasted for 180 days. So about 6 months, right? 30 days a month, you know, that's crazy. That's crazy. Maybe like 5.5 months, I don't know. What, yeah, about 6 months. 104 days. So we've already worked that out. 180.
Where did they sleep?
Anywhere.
Anywhere.
Probably drunk.
Anywhere. There was wine pouring, there was food, kept on turning up. There's like, they would have just fallen over and fell asleep. Wake up and start it again. 180 days, Ainsley. It's crazy.
Longest party we've ever
Like sleep
had.
on his throne?
I don't know, but it was kind of comfy. It was kind of comfy. So, they had this big banquet, and they kept going, and it was a crazy one. And it says in verse 5, and when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and to small, 7 days in the court. So no longer is it just about the rich and the famous people. He's like, I want to keep this party going. Get everyone else in here! So to have more people show up. And you think, he's already done it. He's already thrown this huge party. How much food has this guy got? How much wine has this guy got? But he keeps going. The king feeds and provides more wine for the general people in the palace with him. Verse 6, and all over the palace were the colours white, green, and blue. These were the royal colours of Persia being used. He was showing off his might. This is a party hosted by the Persians. You guys are all invited. There is drinking going on all over the place, and it says in verse 7 that this drinking was done and provided by the state of the king. But then in verse 8 it also says the drinking was according to the law. So there's two things going on here, the state of the king, and then according to the law. There was a law in those days that people would come and feast together, but each guest was obliged to have a drink or else leave the party. It was rude to not raise your glass at least once. Okay? This was the situation for the first party. Okay? The second one basically rolls around and the king says you can drink as much as you want. Doesn't matter anymore. I'm stating this law this time. Basically the first party was drink as the king drinks. As he raises his glass, you drink. The second party had a lot less urgency to drink, probably because everyone had drank for about 180 days, right? There's already a crazy lot going on. But then in verse 9 we get this little glimpse. Also Queen Vashti made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus as well. So he's got all his guys over here, big party. And Vashti's like, you know what, the ladies need a party as well. I'm going to throw a party over here. Why not? So it's a separate feast. Only for the ladies, the guys over here, the girls over here. Makes it a little bit safer for the ladies. We know what happens when guys drink, it gets a little bit crazy. But you know what? The rest of the book, a lot of the decisions that happen, a lot of the things that happen are based off of this next decision by the king. Okay? We go to verses 10 to 12. The king wants to show off the queen. Shannon, can you read those for me? There's two verses there.
Mm-hmm.
3 verses, 10, 11, 12.
On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he said to Mahaman, is the Harbona, the people.
Yeah, lots of people. 7 chamberlains, there you go. Yeah.
Attending the king to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown to show the people and the officials her beauty, for she was very attractive. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the word of the king that was conveyed by the eunuchs. And the king became very angry, and his anger burned in him.
Thank you very much. You got all the names, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. So the king was drunk, okay? His heart was merry. That's kind of what it's saying right there. It has been quite a party. You think about it, it's been 187 days now, just party, 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 party. And on the 7th day, the king made a decision, of course, because it's really wise to make a decision after partying for that long. A big crucial decision that he didn't even talk to the person about. But I wanted to point you in a different direction very quickly. The book of Proverbs warns us frequently about the inability of drunkards to make wise decisions, okay? So, we've got this right here. Proverbs 20, verse 1, Proverbs 21, verse 17, and Proverbs 31, 4 to 5. They all basically say, if you're drunk, do not make decisions. Or if you're a drunkard, you are unwise to make the right decision. And I honestly want to tell you this. Part of my testimony, part of where I've come from, a lot of you guys already know this, but from a really young age, I started to drink. Age 10 up, I was drinking beer, and I could really hold my beer, but you know what I couldn't do very well? Make wise decisions. I'd get in fights, I'd get into arguments, and there'd be a lot of bad things that would happen because of having alcohol in my system. Okay, now I don't drink at all. I've not drank for about 5 years now, praise Jesus. But the idea of it all is, it comes down to this. It's taking away your way to think, basically. This is masking who you truly are. It changes you. And Proverbs says that really well. If you get a chance, check out Proverbs 20, verse 1, Proverbs 21, verse 17, or Proverbs 31, 4 to 5. But basically, this is where the king is coming from. He is making a decision that is going to affect the rest of the book of Esther. And we're going to see what just happens here. He wanted to show the people and the officials and all the people he invited to this party how beautiful his queen was. The king wanted to make a public display as part of a representation of the glory and splendor of his kingdom. And to top it off, he's got a beautiful wife. Bring her in, boys. Come on, let's go. And she says in verse 12, no. I'm kind of happy she did. Because you think 187 days of partying, all guys in that room, a lady walks in, whether she's ugly or not, if they've been drinking that much, it doesn't matter. People are horrible. And we don't know what was happening back then. We don't know what the traditions were. We don't know what the rules were. But we do know someone standing up to a king probably doesn't get you in his good books. But let's focus on Vashti for a second. She says no. There are several different reasons why. Some of them are more speculative, but they still need to be mentioned. Okay? So the first one is, obviously, we can read it. The king calls the queen in to be shown off to his drunken buddies. You can say no to that. Right? You can say no to that. That seems pretty fair. There is a second speculation here that the king only wanted Vashti to come in wearing just her crown, which is why it just says Vashti with her crown. That's a more speculative one. I read a couple of commentaries about that. I'm not 100% confident about that, but there's a reason why the crown was mentioned. So I still think it's a good enough reason to say no for the first option, by the way. So we'll stick with that. But also, think about the third option here. She was hosting her own feast. She had ladies that she was looking after in the royal house. You chose the citadel, I chose the royal house. That's where we're having our parties. They don't cross over, I should be able to hold my party over here. It sounds good. It's just kind of rude to leave a party to go to a different one, right? Especially if you're the host of the party. That makes no sense. I'm sorry, there's a better party over there, I'm going to leave. It doesn't make any sense. So, there's a couple of reasons why Vashti said no, and some of them, again, speculation. But we can just read that maybe she just didn't want to be shown off in front of drunk guys. Okay? Maybe she just didn't want to be used as a trophy, and she wanted to be looked at as a human, and that's perfectly fine. Again, I think it's pretty smart. But we can read in the Bible that wives have a special responsibility to submit to their husbands. That's Ephesians 5:22. But, this is the really crucial part, but this does not mean that a wife must obey her husband if he commands her to sin. Okay? If she thought that the king was leading her into a situation where it might be a little bit dicey, where it might get a little bit crazy, I think that's perfectly fine for her to turn around and say no, and say, actually, I'm going to justify that by saying, this is going to be a bad situation. You're going to be leading me into sin. You're going to be leading me into a temptation, or something like that. That's perfectly fine. You know, I go out for a date night with my wife every week, Sundays. And sometimes we'll go to a bar, because that's the only place to eat the food. You know, Red Robin's got a bar inside it, and we sit there, and I'm like, I can't sit here. And she's like, no? And I'm like, no, I'm too tempted by the alcohol. I need to go and sit somewhere else. And she said, okay. Because she sees that temptation. She's not making me sit at the bar the whole time feeling tempted. She's trying to remove that temptation. So what I'm trying to say to you is, the king pulling her into this situation was almost leading her into a sin situation. Husbands and wives should be coming alongside each other and trying to lead each other away from those temptations, away from those sins, away from their places that leads them to cause sin in their lives. So, I just want to get you to think about that. If you're thinking about life partners, you're thinking about boyfriends and girlfriends, if they lead you into a bad situation that causes you to sin, maybe they're not the right person. I'm just saying. Maybe if they don't support your decision to not drink or to not do something or to stay away from them. Because actually that's just not a good place. We should start this whole relationship thing off by supporting each other. And by then seeing where your weakness is and not by leading you further astray in there. There you go. So Vashti refused the king's order and made the king furious. So angry. And we can read in verse 12 that his anger burned inside him. He was really angry. He was really angry. So this put Queen Vashti in a real dangerous position. Because if you make the king angry, we all know how this movie ends. But she was still, in my opinion, courageous to say no. Okay? To say, I'm not coming into this situation. I still think that was really courageous. Which leads us to our next section here, which is verses 13 to 16, the king's reaction. Ainsley, could you read those four verses, 13, 14, 15, 16?
13 to 16?
Yes, please.
Okay. Then the king said to the wise men, which know the times, for so was the king's manner toward all of who knew the law and judgment. And the next unto him was Cashania.
We're going to say princes, and then you can jump to where.
Princes
There you
of
go.
Persia and
Perfect.
Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat at the first in the kingdom. And shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she hath not prepared the commandment of the king? What's the name again? Is it
Asterius,
Azarias by the
Chamberlains.
Chamberlains and the Mimican answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to the other princes, and to the other people that are in the province of King Azariah.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, we basically read the king's reaction there and what happens next. In verse 13, we can see that the king turns to some wise men to talk about what to do with this situation. What's that?
So how was this, why was he so upset she didn't follow an order?
Do you think kings have a lot of people say no to them?
Probably not.
There you go. Because what happens if you say no to a king?
Awful.
Probably dead or imprisoned or booted out of the kingdom, right? He's the main guy. So I think that's probably one of the reasons. He maybe thought it was like a disrespect. She's not doing as I'm told. She's my wife. She should do everything I tell her to do. Or maybe he's just like, this person said no and I didn't like how that felt, so I'm going to overreact now. But we're going to find out about that overreaction now, okay?
Actually, weren't kings I watched the Esther movie and I'm pretty sure it's not accurate, but he didn't really drink a lot. I think someone suggested it in the movie, but would that be the case? Because he himself drank a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, kings would celebrate a lot. They would celebrate a lot. They would celebrate battles. They would celebrate new births, new laws going into place. And this guy liked to party. I've already said it 20 times in the book of Esther. It talks about banquets being thrown. So just think about that. This guy likes to spend his money. 187 days, constant partying. This guy likes to do that. So I think it's accurate to say that he likes to drink. I don't think that's an out of context type of thing, okay?
Would it kill you drinking that much for a day?
Honestly, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think it's healthy for you. So, yeah, there you go. So we can see the king turns to some wise men around him to talk about what to do with this situation. And it says it was the king's manner to turn to all those who knew the law and the judgment of the land. So that's not a very unwise thing to do. He's turning to people who know the law, who know the lay of the land, basically, and saying, hey, what should we do here? Turn to wise people. It's a good thing. That's actually really great advice for everyone in the world. So the king surrounded himself with people of status, wise people and astrologers, but we must remember they've been partying for 187 days, so I don't know how wise a wise person is if they've been partying for that long, okay? And it doesn't really say in the Bible that there was a space of time that they weren't doing, like they didn't stop partying, slept for a day to recover, and then called wise men. It was like 187 days, calling my wife, she says no, okay, we need to do something about this. Kind of all in the same state, okay? And in this state and in this situation, the question was asked in verse 15, what shall we do unto the Queen Vashti according to the law, because she has not performed the command of the king? She didn't do as she was told. What should we do to her? In a drunken state, in an emotional state, again, the king's anger burned inside him. The king called around wise men for counsel, and they asked the question of what to do to the queen who disobeyed. If they were truly wise men, I just want to say this, they would have taken a couple of days to sober up, realize what they were asking, and realize it was kind of out of line. But instead, we know that they pushed forward. There's an answer. Memucan answered in front of the king and the princes and the wise men that Vashti the queen has not done wrong just in front of the king, but in fact all the people around. All the guests. She has disgraced everyone here. So now the decision just isn't about you, the king. It's about all of us. We should all make this decision together. Because joint drunken decisions are better than just one person. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going on to this next section. Verses 17 to 18. The ripple effect. Who wants to read this one? You want to read this one?
For this deed of the queen shall come abroad to all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath.
Okay, thank you, Wes. So, the reason why this question was asked was because there was this moment that all women would see the queen stand up against her husband. And the idea that women could stand up to men was ridiculous. You're meant to do as you're told. And the king's advisor, Memucan, is particularly concerned about the possible response for all the women at the other feast. They're all seeing her do this. They're all the rich people's wives, because they would have overheard the refusal. And it's just against the culture to disobey your husband. Right? He's the guy. You listen to him. So the big fear here was that the queen's refusal would affect how the other wives of the wise men and the princes and all the rich and famous, and how they would react to them. And this happens when people stand up against a specific power. We see one person stand up and they get used as almost a symbol, or almost as a point in time where you see a change. Okay, we see that against political powers, we see that with people standing up against revolutions or big mighty powers. But we can also see that ripple effect with Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate ripple effect. Okay? One person who went against the world in the sense of what he taught. He taught the truth that disrupted all that was going on around him, so much that the Pharisees and the religious rulers chose to kill him. Think about that for a second. Jesus went against the way of the world. He taught a completely different message about it's not just about yourself, it's about God and you knowing Him. That He's the only way to go to heaven. Whereas everyone else is living like, I just need to make money and live my best life and just do what I want to do. And Jesus is saying, no, it's not about you, it's about God. It's about relationship. It's about knowing Him. So he was teaching something completely different. He was the ultimate. Jesus is the ultimate ripple effect in this. Okay? So one person can change the tide of a country, a nation, or the whole world. Right? So think about this. Vashti's rejection of the king's command basically changed the tide of this whole country, of this whole kingdom. Jesus coming to earth and teaching what He did changed the whole world. It's beautiful because you see this ripple effect going out further and further and further, like a stone dropped into a pond, and how far it reaches, right? So we have this final section here, verses 19 to 22, the king's decree. I'm going to read this part quickly here. And if it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all the empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give it to their husbands, honour both the great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, and that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. This was a big deal. This decree was meant for everyone in the kingdom, so you would all understand it. Okay? For if it pleases the king, well, it does. It makes me happy. So send it out. I like that idea. Then we'll write into effect a law from the Persians and the Medes that it will never be altered. It cannot be altered. That Queen Vashti can never come before the king again. And on top of that, king, you can take away all of her stuff. All of her items and clothing and everything, give it to someone else who's better than her. That's pretty harsh, right? But let it be written. Let it be set in stone, a commandment that cannot be changed. There was a Persian law that if a decree was written, if it was agreed upon, if it was set, agreed upon, and then written, then it could not be changed once it was made official. Once it had that king's seal, boom. It could not be changed after that. You see, all that's really happening here is that the king is being influenced in this decision that doesn't completely get rid of the king. He's not looking to kill her, but it does get rid of her voice. Get her out of it. She's not allowed in the palace anymore. She's not allowed in the place anymore. She's not allowed her things. She's not allowed her status. I'm taking it all away. Her voices went from really big because she's had quite a lot of following, and now she's got nothing. And it all happens in this moment. Verse 20, this message shall be spread all across the kingdom, again as it says in there, because it's so great, so that all the wives will know that they should give their husbands honour, both to the great husbands and to the small husbands. And the not kind of medium husbands as well, I hope. But see, the guys are focused on here is their own personal lives. How is my wife going to respond to me because you let your wife stand up against you? They're not really fixing their focus on their wives and how they should love them. Right? This is the sad part about this. They're getting their priorities mixed up here. What about me? What about how I'm going to be treated? When I get home, I'm not going to have dinner ready and a foot massage. I'm going to have a wife telling me, no, this is horrible. I'm so sorry. They were fixed about their status and not on their actual relationship with their wives. They were getting it very wrong. I want to tell you that before you boys get married, you need to work out that you can't just tell your wives what to do. It's kind of like an agreement thing, and you can't just order them around because after a while you get hit in the head with a frying pan. It's aggressive, you know what happens. And if it pleases the king, the princes, and the people around him, we should send this thing out as soon as possible. So they sent out letters into all the king's provinces, all 127 of them, to people in all their own languages. Think about how big this is. It's not just going out in English, it's going out in every single language of the kingdom. Because everyone needs to understand this is the new decree. The king has got it, and he understands that this is the way it should be. People should start running their house this way. That every man should rule his house. Little side note for you, the Persians were able to transport letters really quickly across the empire back in those days by using this relay method. Okay, so they'd run their horses for about 12 to 14 hours, and then there'd be another horse right there, and they'd pass it over. So it wasn't just one horseman the whole journey. It was staggered, it was split up. And they were able to do this and get letters out to the front lines of battle super fast. And this method was it's a really simple method, but it was really effective. But you just think about the implications of what's happening here. We have a king who inherited a throne, throwing this lavish party to all the rich and famous in the land, deciding to show off his wife, maybe because he just liked the way she looked, or maybe he just wanted to show her off as a trophy. But either way, a rejection that caused a big ripple, forcing families to be changed for, well, we'll find out for how long in Esther. But there's implications that happen here for the rest of the book. Vashti's going to be gone, and someone else is going to have to step up. I think you kind of get the idea of who it's going to be, because the book is the name of the book, but we'll find out. I've got 3 final points after this, but has anyone got any thoughts about the first chapter of Esther? Wes, have you got any nuggets for us?
Not really a whole lot this time. I think
Yeah.
just the king is like a really kind of interesting character. Because you have, kind of like the side of him like gets really angry and does stuff when he's angry. Then also, he talks to people, like he has their counsel, like the law is important to him. Like all throughout the book, like he reads the laws and he says he did this according to the law.
Yeah.
Just really kind of interesting. Like he had some problems, but like
Absolutely.
parts of it are like really pretty good, which probably is why, spoilers, but God was able to kind of work and like
Yeah, that's it.
get him to
Yeah.
be doing the right things.
There was a change. And there's something to be said as well, and this is just out, not from the Bible here, but when people get drunk, you kind of see their true side. So the true side of this king was clearly one that got angry very quickly. But even in this situation, what I love about, and Wes has already said it, spoiler alert, God does some work in the king, right? Thank God for that. But the great thing about it is, what it tells me is that even if you're a drunk, or even if you're an angry person, or even if you're a sexist person, God can use you and change you and use you to push forward his kingdom. I'm really thankful for that, because what it means is that people aren't getting rejected just because of the decisions that they're making right now. God can use you in the future, which is great. Has anyone else got any thoughts about Esther before we move to the final 3 points? No? Cool. Okay, final 3 points here. Where in your life do you need to be courageous? Okay, Vashti was courageous. She was strong when she stood up to the thing that was going to be a sin or a temptation or just a bad place to be in. Right? Think about that. Where in your life do you need to be courageous? Specifically, though, for Jesus. Where do you need to be courageous for Jesus in your life? Do people know that you're a Christian? Do people know that you follow Jesus? When you go to a shop, when you go to the mall, when you go to a school, wherever you go, co-op or anything like that, do people know that you are a Christian? The best thing that happens to me on Monday nights and Tuesday nights is I go to jiu-jitsu and I go and fight people, and they all call me Pastor Jamie. They all know that I'm a Christian. They all know I love Jesus. And they might be choking me out, but I'll just be like, Jesus loves you! Or they'll be arm-barring me and I'll be like, can I pray for you for anything? A little less extreme, but they all know that they can talk to me at any time about that stuff and I'll pray for them. Do people in your life know that you're Christians, and how can you be courageous in your life to share that with people? Give me 2 seconds, okay, I've got 2 more words. Where is your strength coming from? Okay, obviously this is a moral thing that Vashti's standing up against. This is a heart thing that she's not really wanting to go for. But where is your strength coming from in this situation? She clearly stood up against the king and said no for a reason. Okay, what about you guys? What are you saying no to? What are you being courageous for? But where is that strength coming from? Can I challenge you to get it from Jesus more than anything else? Can I ask you to look to him for that instead of anything else? It's really important where we draw our strength from, because after a while, Jamie's strength is going to fail. But I know that Jesus' strength goes on forever. Okay? That's where we should be relying on. Last one here. Do you ask God for strength, courage, and comfort? That's a really funny one, because sometimes it's like, God, can I have a pony? God, can I have this? Can I do that? God, thank you for having a good day at school. And it's really kind of shallow prayers. How about asking God for strength in a situation? Or courageousness in a situation? Or comfort in a difficult situation? Because you know it might be an awkward conversation coming. God, please give me comfort in this time. Or strength for withstanding a temptation just to whip out and lash out at someone, or courageousness to talk to them about how much you love them. There's different reasons for different things here. But we're not called to be people who just kind of go with the flow. We are asked to be people who do ripple effect, that will send out things, just like Jesus did. So I want to challenge you guys to cause those ripples. Vashti caused a ripple across this whole kingdom that changes the whole format, the rest of this book, based on her one thing, to say no. Hey Adam, do you want to go to a party? No. Oh, why not? Okay, I don't believe in drinking. I don't want to do that. Actually, I don't think it's good for me. Whatever. You know what I mean? When people come up to you with temptations and sinful situations that you might be pushed into, just saying that one word might change someone's decision to do it themselves. Okay? Being courageous and standing up to those things is a big deal. Having the strength to say no, but knowing where you're getting your strength from as well, is an awesome thing.